I'm from Afghanistan Peace Project. We used to be called Voices for Creative Nonviolence, and we literally just changed our name a few months ago. We've been on peace delegations to Kabul for the last probably 15 years to visit a group called the Afghan Peace Volunteers, and I'll speak a bit more of that later, but first I'd just like to kind of big up the importance of protesting here. 4 years ago I was one of 4 people who were seemingly, it was quite just a normal Tuesday morning. We were arrested with our lock-on, very innocent lock-on, about exactly there. And we argued, all of us had experience with living with refugees. My friend spoke about his friends in Sudan. I spoke about friends I'd made in Afghanistan, and the judge acquitted us. And then shortly afterwards the CPS appealed, and then shortly after that we went to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court found us not guilty again. And they argued. So I just mention this because it's very important to understand your European Convention rights. Yeah, so we argued that we were acting according to freedom of speech and freedom of assembly. And I wasn't taught that at school, I think, yeah. And so the other point is that the Supreme Court believed us, that we thought this was such an important issue. I mean, they don't directly say that, obviously, but so this piece of legislation, and not legislation, but the case is called Ziegler, and it's been used in a lot of Extinction Rebellion cases now. So also standing here, so during that process I had a lot of time to think about the arms trade, and I've done quite a lot of speaking about the arms trade, and particularly about the myths that everybody tells us, and lots of handy quotes. I mean, the first thing that springs to mind, I find easiest to remember, is that arms are not like cabbages, that nobody's going to eat them or use them for life, or grow them again, or make them into compost. Once arms are made, they're there, and they have to be used. And if they're used and they injure somebody, that person has those injuries for their whole life. I met a friend in Kabul, his mother showed us injuries. So she must have been a little bit younger than me, maybe the same age as me, with grandchildren like me. She showed me injuries to her hands that she'd sustained on her wedding night from a Russian airstrike that made it really difficult for her to work. So this is an important thing to remember about arms. They're just not any old bit of industry. They're very completely different from any kind of industry, really. And not for nothing it's called the military-industrial complex. I mean, I've got Eisenhower. I don't know if you've lost it. Okay. Here we go. He said, in the councils of government, we must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex. The potential for the disastrous rise of misplaced power exists and will persist. So he wrote that 60 years ago, and I think the situation in Afghanistan is just a really incredible illustration of exactly that. The millions and millions of pounds that have been made for private companies out of the instability and the war in Afghanistan. And Assange said a long time ago, the goal is to use Afghanistan to wash money out of the tax bases of the US and Europe So our tax bases through Afghanistan and back into the hands of a transnational security elite. The goal is an endless war, not a successful war. I think this is really important to remember when thinking about the arms trade. There's a woman she's called Mary Caldwell. She's written a book called Global Security Cultures, and she describes this kind of security culture as the forever war. Well, you've heard of forever war, but there's a purpose behind forever war. Within the instability, my friend here, Jean, was talking about how it suits Pakistan that there's instability in Afghanistan. It suits a lot of people to have this kind of forever war. Private security companies benefit, illegal mining, illegal narcotics all benefit from the instability, and of course the arms trade. And I think another myth that's been blown out of the crisis in Afghanistan, if you want to call it a crisis, has illustrated is the myth that there's a sort of good arms trade and a bad arms trade. I mean, we can see obviously that there really isn't. I mean, I've got this picture for you. You probably all saw this on Twitter. These are the things that the US Army maybe left behind. Well, of course they left them behind. When they go back, they can get shiny new ones, more money for the arms trade, and also maybe the Taliban. This might even be a little taster for the Taliban, who could maybe one day become their customers. So I have the Afghan peace volunteers. I mean, so as we were talking about this peace and this peace is certainly necessary for life. And from the 2 times that I visited Kabul, that was the first thing that struck me. I was straight out of a quite heavy full-time job, and I felt anything that makes your job harder is really bad. And it seemed to me that everything about war and the destruction left by the war just made women's lives harder to travel, to meet with people, harder to work, harder to look after and feed their children. And in this way, I'd say peace is one of these necessary things you need to live. And I think my friends in Kabul, the Afghan peace volunteers, very much know this. A lot of their projects are about education for children who work in the street. They give them a bit of food, and in exchange, like a month's supply for their family of rice and oil, and in exchange the children can come to school for a bit. And they also employ or sort of do a small business for women to make duvets, which they then give to displaced people. There's hundreds of thousands of displaced people in Kabul. So this is one of their quotes. My friend, I'll call her Zed. She says, I hope my friend's feelings are right about the US Army. For more than 10 years they spent huge amounts of money on war and made life dangerous and difficult for us. I think President Biden understands that he can't bring peace from this way. She wrote this before the army left. The Afghan people don't know what the US troops are doing here. Every day there are killings by explosions, drones, weapons. The US troops have just made a land of conflict, so they can bring more guns and kill people in different ways. They have made Afghanistan into a poor country whose people are so tired of what is going on. I think they should know this country needs life, health, education, childcare. Women are so tired of military solutions. Also, they should know we need peace. I'm a woman who hasn't seen any change after all these years. Still, we use our families in war. I think only Afghans can bring peace to Afghanistan. So the Afghan peace volunteers as you can imagine, they live in a community, and they run a community centre for young people, and they did small acts of resistance, like they did a burqa protest, and they do a women's bike ride, and they had a border-free football team, which I saw playing, which was supported by Captain Ultras, who are not far from here. But recently they've started growing up, having families, and an offshoot moved to Bamiyan, where we've been supporting them. They buy solar pots, which are things that look a bit like a satellite dish with a kettle in the middle, and they've been handing them out, which means people don't have to forage for wood and or spend a lot of money on fuel. And they've been running a school for the street children, and also doing a lot of planting. They're very keen on permaculture. So we were supporting them, but obviously all of this is finished now. So just as G said, we're trying to be in contact on WhatsApp Messenger, and with our friends in America and Australia, Portugal, trying to help them leave. There's about 90 people altogether and their families, so we've been raising money to help them leave. Just lastly, on the PayPal that's broken, I mean, I have got also, just lastly before I stop, I've been thinking a lot about this, how the arms fair and the American NATO leaving Afghanistan. I think this is a sort of question for everybody, really. It's a sort of discussion for the future. What does a peace movement really? What does it do? So one of the it's definitely important to stop these very harmful industries, such as the arms industry. I'd say people all across the world are calling, not just Afghanistan, Colombia, for instance, are calling for us to stop for people in Europe and America to stop the flow of weapons. But I just also, it just felt uncanny that we were able to go to Afghanistan when the American army was there and when the UK army was there. And I don't know what's going to happen in the future, but it was as if the American army brought its own peace movement with it, which I think is again the point that my friend was meaning, that only Afghans can bring peace to Afghanistan, but we need to be in solidarity with them and support them.